V.I.P.E.R.S Evolution, Chapter 10, Mayhem on Holcomb Street. 1130 Holcomb. We called to a situation by a resident saying there's a problem because there's something going on. As we go over there to the scene, it's myself and 01 Bravo. It's just two of us, me and Brian. That's how big the entire organization is at the time. And we get there. There's an 80-year-old man and a 30-year-old man standing together. The 80-year-old man is bleeding from the mouth, and a 30-year-old man is standing in front of him. And right in front of him, both of them is one man faced off with him in a sweatsuit, and he's about 30 to 35. The situation also has to the left, this is in a vestibule of an apartment building. To the left, down a hallway, I can see some women screaming, and they have like a 2x4, and they're slamming it into a door. So I yell at the women to stop, and I can see the man is bleeding from the mouth. Another man standing in front of him in the main area. So I started giving directives to them to back away from each other, and at the same time I can't really hear because the women are screaming, and they're using this 2x4 with nails in it as a battering ram against this door. And I can hear people screaming on this side of the door. So there's approximately 7 to 8 women banging on this door, battering the door with a 2x4 with nails in it. And then I can hear kids crying or screaming inside the door, and I hear a woman or a young lady screaming inside the door as well. But out here I see that the men all faced off and one bleeding. So I have my rifle in my hand, which is 7.62 caliber SKS rifle with a 32 round magazine, a bipod, folding stock, and a scope, and a flash suppressor with a flashlight as well, mounted light. And as I move forward, I put the weapon into a 45-degree angle, and I yell at the women to put the woman who's like the main one who's battering this door to stop and put the 2x4 down. She says, "Don't no man tell me what to do." And I came forward, I pushed the 2x4 down, I stomped on it, and it pulled out of her hands. Then she looked at me to threaten me, and I said, "Go away." And she clearly see that I'm armed. There's about 8 women, and they start leaving. So after they do that, I kick the 2x4 away, and now I'm looking at the men. The one guy has his right hand inside of his waistband, and the one guy in front of him says he's got a gun. So I have my weapon in front of me in a 45-degree angle, and all of a sudden, my team member at the door has a shotgun up, and he's pointing at the door, and he's screaming, "Shots fired, shots fired." And I can't really hear him because of the girls. And then also when the girls shut up and leave the floor, I can hear he's been yelling for a while, "Shots fired, shots fired." But the women were all screaming, and I couldn't hear him at first. And so then all of a sudden the door opens up, and a guy comes in with a shotgun. We're both pointing our weapons at him, and there's another guy over here to the left that has his hands on the side of his pants. And so these two separate situations at the same time. The guy comes in, he was shooting outside the door. He comes in with the shotgun. We disarm him. We still have to keep our eye on the guy with the pistol in his pants, and the 80-year-old man bleeding in front of him. And we unload his weapon. He has these black number 6 shotgun rounds coming out of a 12 gauge. He says, "I'm the assistant manager. I was shooting my gun out front to get you guys to come help us." I said, "Well, we're already here. Shooting your gun doesn't help the community, so don't do that anymore." Now, this guy considers himself the assistant manager, and we were told that he was the assistant manager. But clearly, he's also the weed man. He supplies weed to the people in the buildings, to the girls, and mainly, and he sells little packets of weed. I don't know that for sure, but I believe it because when I was doing tactics on him one day, some small bags of weed fell out of his pocket as I was doing a demo on him as a manager of the buildings, and this was a month before that. So he says, "I'm just trying to get you guys' attention. I wasn't trying to cause any trouble." So we just disarmed him while watching the other guy who has the bleeding man in front of him. And the other guy says, "This guy carjacked this man." And so basically this 30-year-old man who has his gun inside of his waistband has carjacked the 80-year-old man. Over to the back behind them is a situation sort of related. The 30-year-old man in this story was reportedly dating a 14-year-old girl inside this apartment. The women were going to attack the 14-year-old girl because one of them is dating the 30-year-old man who's now defending the 80-year-old man who's bleeding from the mouth. The man with the gun inside of his waistband is standing there quiet, just looking at both of them and watching us at the same time. As we disarm all the black 12-gauge shotguns shells out of the 12-gauge, we give him back his gun, and then the police pull up. So both my guy and he both leave with their shotguns and go to a different floor. The police come in, it's gang squad and some regular officers. When they walk in, approximately 8 officers walk in. When they walked in, the one officer says to me, "What's that on you?" And I said, "This is a 7.62 caliber SKS rifle." I said, "Right behind me is a carjacker, and he robbed the 80-year-old man, and that's why the man is bleeding. He also has a gun in his waistband." He said, "Yeah, okay, we got this." And he said, "Give me that." So I gave him my rifle, and you can clearly tell by the way they're handling it that they're not very sure on how to handle an assault rifle. And the one guy says, one of the officers says, "You can't have this here." I said, "Well, according to your lieutenant, I can have that." And I gave him the lieutenant's name, and he understood then that I'd already spoken with his lieutenant. And the law is that if I am the security for the building, which I am, designated by the owners as their internal security, the law states that you can protect yourself or anyone else. You have a Second Amendment right, and as long as the gun is inside of the long gun is inside of a case between buildings, then it's legal. And I explained that to him. My case is sitting right there, and one of the gang squad guys begins to talk to the criminal, one of the other criminals in the hallway, and says, talking about personal things, about sandwiches or, friendship or something. Very friendly. They're talking about when they're going to go out to eat or something. And clearly one of the guys he's talking with is clearly a criminal. And as I explained to them, this guy has a gun, they said, "We got this." And they started walking this guy. 2 police officers walk up and tell him, they say, big dog, where's your apartment at? Where your apartment at?" And the guy says, and that's all he would say. And they couldn't believe these police officers, even though I just told them right in front of him he has a gun, they were going to let him go. So he thinks it's a trick. He doesn't believe these police officers are going to let him go. So he's kind of freaking out. And he literally, they like keep coaxing him. They walk him downstairs and walk him in. He says, "Is this your apartment?" And he's like, "Yeah." He starts shaking his head kind of reluctantly. And they're like, "Okay, well, go on in here, dog. Go on in here, big dog." And I kept telling him, I said, "I told you he has a gun." And then when I tried to whisper to the officers, like, "Hey, I said he has a gun." They said, "Hey, we got this. We got this. Go on up there now." Try to tell me that I should leave the basement. And I was not leaving, because this is where these police officers can be killed. The next thing you know, we're looking crazy. So I look at it as my obligation to keep these officers from getting killed. Clearly very important at this point. So they walk him into this apartment and they leave. And then they come upstairs and they tell me that, you can't do this, you can't do that, you get in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. I said, I don't care about getting in trouble. I'm trying to help the families here have a decent quality of life. And one of the Sergeant Golston, he says to me, "Who do you think you are?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I'm the security for buildings." He goes, "No, you're not. You're security for a guard tower around the corner." I said, "No, sir. I was hired by the people that own these buildings." He said, "No, you weren't." I said, "Yes, I was, sir." He goes, "Look, you're going to get in a lot of trouble." I said, "I understand. If I get in trouble, it's okay. At least I know I tried. I cannot accept the fact that I have not tried. These people are in need of help. We need to help people that live here." And he goes, "We'll do that. We'll do our job. You don't worry about that." I said, "Well, why can't we work together? I don't understand. The people are watching us. They need to know that you and we are working together. Security and law enforcement are working together." He goes, "No, we don't. We got this. This is what we do. You do what you do. We do what we do. We got this under control." I said, "Sir, there's lots of violence here. People are getting hurt. That's a carjacker in there who's armed, who hit the 80-year-old man. He's bleeding from the mouth. He hit him with a gun in the mouth. And then you just sent the 80-year-old victim to his apartment, told him to be quiet and just go to his apartment. Then the guy with the gun is downstairs right now." He said, "Don't worry about that. We got this." And I said, "Okay." And then he said, "And I'm going to tell you something else. If I hear any more stories about you knocking any doors down off people's houses, then I'm gonna come get you and I'm gonna come get your guns. I'm coming to your house and taking your guns. I said, no, sir. No, sir. That's that's not appropriate. I'm not breaking any laws. I said, we should be working together. He said, you heard what I said. I'm coming to your house taking your guns if I find out about you knocking any doors off, any more hinges. I said, wow. And that's what changed my tone. I said, you know what, sir? I said, I don't want any problems with you, Sergeant. But at the same time, the only person you could be talking about is this one particular drug dealer that lives in one of these buildings. I said, now I'm not going to say I knocked his door off of his hinges, but I can tell you this. Any drug dealers living in our buildings are not safe, and they need to leave. This is for families only, and there will no longer be any place for them in these buildings. They were told not to have traffic. If they have traffic, their doors come off the hinges. Next are their windows. We live in Michigan, so it's going to be very cold. You cannot deal drugs if you're freezing to death. And I told him, I said, I'm just letting you know that someone's going to knock the door off the hinges dressed just like me. And the officer was like, you heard what I said? And I said, yes, sir. And he took off. And I really didn't want any trouble with any police officers. I tell you that right now. I did not start this organization to have problems with police officers. I started it so that we can help have a safe place for families and have a way for law enforcement officers to train. So I really need them not to be the enemy of the training program. So I was already upset that I even had this kind of a heated debate with this officer because I'm trying to make them my customers in the future. I have police officers train with me. I can't afford to have any issues. So make a long story short, that did not end well. But at the end of the situation, no violence took place outside of the old man getting struck in the mouth and carjacked, and he got his car back now, I guess. But, at the end of the day, no one was dead. So it was a happy day because prior to this moment, there had been one death per month in this one neighborhood, one murder per month on the average. And we were able to bring that to closure, and that's what I'm very proud of, as well as stopping all the home invasions. And the home invasions were pretty much a regular part of the community. Home invasions would take place on a near daily basis, and no one would ever be caught for home invasions or for murders. Almost none. No one was ever apprehended. This concludes Chapter 10, V.I.P.E.R.S. Evolution.